Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today, we welcome Rishma Jivan. She's a medical student and she co-wrote the Kevin MD article, Medical Curriculum 2.0, Integrating Technology and Innovation in Medical Education. Rishma, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. Poe. It's wonderful and an honor to be here today. Thank you.
All right, so tell us the events that led you to write this article and then talk about the article itself.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for letting me speak about the article here. My journey into medical school started, with almost 5 years that I took off between my undergrad and medical school. And in that time, I worked in health tech back in the Bay Area. And then I joined medicine and I realized how different, the frameworks that we're taught are, how we look at and approach problems, how we develop solutions. They were pretty different. And it was sort of I wrote this about 2 years ago, in fact, my first draft, and I remember thinking it'd be a great way for me to just bring together the two sides of my professional career and just portray sort of what I have learned and how I think they could be integrated. And, I took it to my co-authors, Dr. Latif and Dr. Hota, and they loved it and added their insight as well. And I really appreciated that. And so that led me to writing this article. And to provide a summary for those who haven't had a chance to read it, I talk about you know, how medical students are trained, but we forget to take a very important part of our professional life and are not being taught that. So, kind of how to not only use the technology that is going to be a part of our professional lives, but how to co-create it, just kind of going from being a user to a co-creator. And that is a transition that I speak about, how the frameworks of something as simple as creating the most minimum viable product, which is just having the basic user stories in tech and saying we're going to address this and then we will keep reiterating the product. That approach is very different from what we're taught in the medical curriculum. And I think there's a lot of value in bringing medical students from the get-go into the spaces where we're creating these solutions so that we have a better chance of having them be successful. And so that is, the article provides a framework for that and some more insight into that.
All right. So you said that you spent 5 years in that health IT space in the Bay Area. What was it like then, knowing that you may go into medicine? So contrast a little bit about those two different cultures.
Yeah, it wasn't something I expected to do. I did my undergrad in biochemistry, I was pre-med, and then I started off as a medical scribe. And I was at a company, I was Google Glass startup, and I remember after a year, I thought, oh, I want to know what else I can do here. And I started working as an EHR analyst, started working on EHR implementations, and then eventually went on to work at a different company where I developed revenue cycle management products and things in Salesforce and learned a lot about product development and project management. And it sort of happened just by chance, just trying new things because I truly, truly felt sort of blindsided by all the aspects of healthcare that I wasn't getting in touch with as a pre-med. And we do interact a lot. We interact a lot with health insurance. We interact a lot with, you know, our EHRs, whether it's a scribe, whether it's a dictation tool, whether it's a wearable device that our patients are telling us about. There are so many components that impact a patient care and patient's life and how they're interacting with healthcare that I just didn't know when I was a pre-med. And so that space really allowed me to understand what innovation looks like. It looks imperfect, but it looks
Mhm.
very, targeted and it's guided by a problem that you see and to see that there are so many ways in which we can find a solution, we can reiterate it if it's not perfect the first time, how we can collaborate with people in different spaces. I don't have an engineering background, but how, connecting with them and speaking to them about developing something, how to streamline workflows. They're all very, very important skills that I think are transferable. And I just really enjoyed that. And I'm really grateful for that experience. And I think it makes me more informed in terms of how I'm interacting with my patients. And then I hope that I'm able to take that back and say, you know what, I create this bridge between creating these solutions and providing patient care and saying there's a more integrated way in which we're approaching that.
So you've had your foot into both worlds. Of course, your experience in the health IT space, and you're a fourth year medical student, so you had a few years of being exposed to clinical medicine. One of the things that you touch upon in your article is that sometimes these health IT tools aren't as integrated or used as much because there's a lack of sometimes clinical understanding in these health IT startups. So is that true? Is that a stereotype that I often read? So tell us about that aspect.
Yeah, it's something that I just kind of understood along the way when I was working at one of the clinics that I volunteered at on the weekends. It was a free clinic back in the Bay, and we worked with uninsured and underinsured patients. And we, of course, had the COVID pandemic, and our patients are not necessarily from backgrounds where they have easy access to telehealth. There's a
Yeah.
digital divide there. It's one phone between family members and things like that. And so there were a lot of things that we were juggling at the time. And there was this approach that we wanted to take, which was reaching out and being a telehealth medicine clinic essentially for our patients and not disrupt their care. But when you looked at just the clinician side, it had great clinician, like clinical judgment, of course, but there was a gap between, well, how can we do that? And I was working with somebody who took care of our EHR at our clinic, and we talked about how we can use simple project management tools with Kanban boards, Zoom, and things like that to start a telehealth clinic. And at that time, we experimented with that a little bit and we were able to make that work. And now we have every weekend, because I just went back for an anniversary for the clinic, every weekend we have a telehealth clinic for our
Mhm.
patients. And when we took that into consideration, saying, okay, there are some patients who may not always have access to like an iPhone to call us over video, but here are the steps we can take to ensure that they're available on the phone at this time first, and then that created this synergy of conversation between, okay, well, this is how much time we're going to need to talk about their diabetes. This is what we're going to need follow up. Okay, let's take it back to the drawing board and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to use this integration in this platform, and we're going to send out these reminders, and we're going to send it as a text message because they don't have this platform on their phone. And these conversations started taking place and providing even better, just having care evolve and how we're providing that care evolve. And so I do think that because of that synergy, we're able to create a version of workflow that worked for everybody at the clinic. And so that's sort of what I like to highlight is that while there are moments where we don't have the space always to create that collaboration, I want to say that there is a lot of value in putting in the effort to do that. And maybe even taking a second to describe the two languages that we're speaking, right?
Yeah.
People who are building product are speaking very different languages to those who are using it. And so sometimes the activation energy can be a lot in the very beginning, but I think it's just exponential sort of understanding after that initial bump.
Now, of course, in your article, you explain and argue why medical students need to be better versed in the language of health IT and health entrepreneurship. So, give us more details as to why they need to know that information.
Yeah. We have, at least off of late, for a very long time, we've started having more individuals come from diverse backgrounds into medicine. And that the pool of medical students right now who are entering the workforce are more diverse than the pool that we've had in the past. And so that already highlights they're bringing perspective that we don't have. They're bringing perspective of, okay, we can say this is what an ethnic group needs to do necessarily because they're predisposed to certain conditions. But when we have students in this space, they can tell us, well, this is actually how they interpret that information that you give them. They say yes here, but then they may not go back because it doesn't culturally align. That is something as simple that we have gotten to have a better understanding of. But then how are we communicating that, right? How are we using that to then say portal needs to be able to provide that feedback as well? Sometimes you we've talked about this in the past, I think, with a few of my mentors, where you educate a certain person in a family, you educate that entire family.
Mhm.
And so when you bring more people who are coming from diverse backgrounds and you set them into these spaces who not only come from ethnically diverse backgrounds, but professionally diverse backgrounds, and you sit them together, you're already starting off a practice of collaboration between people who are very different. And that sets a really great stage for the workforce to then become more collaborative. And so that's really why I think it should be started earlier. And it also starts to build this idea that, okay, let's look for the little gaps that we have in healthcare. Let's look we're going into, let's say, third year, we're doing all these rotations. Oh, you know what? I see that gap. oh, that's a communication issue that we have.
Hmm.
Is it happening across all disciplines? Yes, it is. Because third year medical students are moving through specialties a lot faster than those already in the workforce, right? We've already decided our
Yeah.
specialty once we're in the workforce. And so I think it provides a lot of value in bringing these fresh eyes into these conversations and then having empowering them with these tools and making them feel even more part of healthcare because that's what we came into medicine for. We wanted to improve patient care and we wanted to be directly responsible for that. And this allows us to add another layer of that component and contribute to the industry in a more valuable way.
Now, can you give us an example? And I know that you've just finished your third year of medical school, but it certainly could be a story of something that you've seen of either yourself or someone with that tech background making a difference in clinical care, having that tech experience and knowledge. What would be a story and an example of that?
I've been working on this project with some of my mentors. We often see, at least if you've done some of your primary care rotations, you'll see that there are a lot of delays sometimes when the patient's coming to see the provider. A lot of these patients, they take time off from work. They drove a really long distance, depending on where you are in the country. You don't have easy access, and so they're waiting, and it affects their schedule. It affects their child pickup,
Hmm.
things like that. And there are certain tools that we've been working on where we're able to gather pertinent information about their healthcare or what condition they're having that they're coming in for and getting that before they come into the clinic to make that clinic visit a lot more efficient. And what that means is that they've had also time to process the timeline of their condition, what they've been experiencing, and being able to take their own time and not feel like they're being rushed to provide that information. And also helps them understand we're going to prioritize these three things that you're coming in for. And so, what are those? And you're not put, on the spot. And
Hmm.
so, when they come in, they're able to then know that their physician is ready to target those three items that they have been worried about. And they know they're going to be taken care of. And it also provides the physician a certain layer of added information about what is this visit about compared to only chart reviewing. And there are instances where physicians are told you can only spend X number of minutes with your patients. It takes away a certain level of burden from that time limit
Hmm.
when you employ tools like these. And so we also recognize that, this is not necessarily going to address the geriatric population that doesn't necessarily know how to use these portals, but it can help in certain populations and then hopefully create a certain level of balance. And so that is something that is in the works. And I think there are versions of that that others are also trying. Can't speak more to that, but that is something that we've been thinking of.
Now, when it comes to incorporating more technology and health IT knowledge in our medical students today, how exactly would that look like? Would it be internships? Would it be rotations? Would it be electives? How would you envision that happening?
Yeah. I highlight some of those as some of the ways that we can do that because we can do case studies all we want. We can review it, but we know in medicine that hands-on experience is the best. And so I think partnerships are a great way. I think adding a level of expectation on our faculty currently on being at the cutting edge of what is happening in tech can be quite a lot because it happens at a rate much faster than we can keep up. And so I do believe collaboration and partnerships are a great way to start off. So it could be local leaders in the space, whether they're having a new startup. It could be institutions that have engineering programs where they have little hackathons or areas where they're coming together just to talk about, hey, this is an idea I have, or this is what I need a solution for. And then you start creating projects together and you start working on them and you have resident advisors. You can also partner with incubators in this space. Most major cities tend to have them for startups and say, hey, do you have any companies in the healthcare space that would require clinical judgment, would require that additional feedback? And do you want beta testing done? Because these are, physicians may not have as much time. Medical students might have a little bit more time. They might have a little bit more perspective on how to do this, a little bit more tech savvy, possibly. And so the learning curve can be a lot shorter. And so those are some of the ways that I recommend working on it. So I think those with elective rotations are a possibility, but those are great places to start building a curriculum, I think, for the students that are involved and want to be involved.
Now, what about those medical students who may be listening to you and are inspired by what they're hearing and they want to take the initiative and look for
Mhm.
opportunities in the health IT space? What kind of advice do you have for these type of students?
Yeah. Um, Well, I would say, please come in. If you have space, I would say we need this. I would recommend starting off very local to understand some of the basics. So if you don't have a background, I've done this in the past where I would go to Udemy, Coursera, YouTube, LinkedIn webinars just to understand the basics of what I'm interested in. So you could be interested in AI. Look up the basics of machine learning and AI. What are data algorithms? Things like that. What does it mean to build a product? And it's often you may not understand the very basic things that they're talking about, but you're starting to get exposed, right? Reading articles, many of them are on Kevin MD, and then reaching out to individuals at your hospital. And so there are going to be clinicians at your hospital that work on EHRs, that work on workflows like these, and saying, hey, like I am interested in this. Can we get together and talk about certain projects? If you, for whatever reason, don't find those available at your institution, there are always other institutions in the city. I've done that. I work with other universities as well, and reaching out to them. Cold emailing is a very, very beneficial skill to have. It helps a lot, and you learn a lot. And I would say LinkedIn is a great tool to just learn who's in the space, what kinds of things are they speaking at, or what are they saying, what are the articles out there. Those are really great places to start off, and then you just kind of learn a little bit more along the way. I would say the space of health tech, especially with clinicians involved, tends to be pretty small. And
Mm.
so once you start getting into one project or talking to one person, they'll often tell you, oh, speak to this person too. They're working on this aspect of healthcare and health tech. And so it sort of will domino effect and you'll get more projects. But I would say that taking those courses and just even shadowing to an extent or talking to somebody at your hospital and healthcare system about what they're doing is a great start.
We're talking to Rishma Jivan. She's a medical student. Today's Kevin MD article is Medical Curriculum 2.0, Integrating Technology and Innovation in Medical Education. Rishma, let's end with some take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
Oh, thank you so much. I think we can take on the idea that, tech is going to take over jobs, be worried about it. And that I think fear mongering often leads to a sense of deviating you from knowledge and information that you could use to help patient care. So I hope that everyone who has listened or has watched this podcast episode or read the article feels empowered to just take that one more step and just learn a little bit more about what's happening in this space. All your perspectives are valuable. I'm hoping that we are all empowered to co-create solutions. We understand patients better. We are so informed of clinical judgment as well as patient care, and we understand policy. So all of those make us great advocates for where solutions should go and how healthcare should be driven. And so I hope that this empowers more people and inspires more people to join the space. Thank you very much.
Rishma, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and insight. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.